everybody. My name is Sherry Sontag, and I am my colleague from Bloomberg LP. Building a career off-road. What we meant by it originally has evolved a little bit. Originally, we had several independent contributors, individual contributors, not independent, who were choosing not to be managers. And they were finding ways of having really kind of incredibly creative careers, where, to borrow from journalism like I typically do, they had gotten, their roles were defined by the work that they did and not by any titles. And so the original incarnation of this panel was those people and the people who were their team leads and managers who helped find a way to make that possible beyond titles. As this has evolved, and we've done it with different people and a couple of times, we realized something. It's less about ICs and their TLs and managers, and much more about people who start taking what they're good at, no matter what it is, no matter what their art is. And some people's art is managing, and some people's art is deep dives into tech. And as a collaboration, floating beyond titles, taking whatever tools were at our disposal and making teams and careers that transcended both. Now, to a certain degree, we're lucky. Bloomberg does give us a lot of freedom. But a lot of us have been at other places. And you know what? Personalities kind of are consistent. I think we were the kinds of people who were born mentors. We were born diggers. We were born explorers. And it comes together in such a way that if you have the guts to be who you are, you can, and I'm now going to quote Tom at this from his other talk, bring your whole self to work and come back with something that nobody could have imagined on any org chart. So I'd like my team of people to introduce themselves now, starting with John.
Thank you. I'm John Paven. I am currently a team lead, which is kind of the lowest level of management at Bloomberg. I started doing that about 2 years ago. Up until then, I was an individual contributor. I worked in the Silicon Valley area before coming to Bloomberg, and before that, I was an experimental physicist.
Hey there, I'm Cal Pratt. I've been working at Bloomberg for about 6 years now. 2 years ago, I made a switch into a new team, so I'm actually fairly new with, writing C++ every day. But yeah, I am an individual contributor. I've been asked to join management a number of times. I don't think that is for me.
Hi, I'm Michelle Souza, not Obama. And I'm a software engineer at Bloomberg. So I've been at the company for 4 years now, on the same team just because I love it so much. But yeah, that's just me.
Hi, I'm Lara. I've been at Bloomberg since 20... No, wait, what is it? Is it 2000? I can't even remember now.
How many years?
2011, was it? Something like that. Yeah, that's about it, since 2011. And I've been in Marek's team since 2018. These numbers don't seem right, because I can see this date 2025 on people's t-shirts. Oh gosh, oh wow. And then, so obviously that's kind of like over a decade at Bloomberg. And then previous to that, I've worked in different sized companies. So I worked in a very small software consultancy company that did some train operations and defense subcontracting work. I worked for a business intelligence company that got bought out by IBM. For that, in a very small kind of like web agency. So I've seen all sorts of software development. But yeah, I'm pretty comfortable at Bloomberg at the moment.
So I'm Marek. I'll try to get my numbers right. So I just celebrated 10 years with Bloomberg, and for last kind of 6 years, 8 years, I'm leading a team about like 6 developers. We are doing some hardcore C++ that's like used in every binary in the company almost. So it's great fun. Before that, I worked in some like smaller companies. Also led some teams, but it was kind of less formal. Like it was like different. Yeah.
Do you want me to ask you? Oh no. Do you want me to ask you why you're on this particular panel, or do you want me to say why I think you're on this particular panel?
I don't know.
Well, by the way, I want you guys to start talking to us too, but Lara and Marek are an interesting duo in my world. Lara and I were both the kinds of people to find projects and dive deep. And we started combining together across continents, across teams, across departments. And at one point, Marek actually asked Lara if maybe I was taking too much of her time and should he like run some interference? And Lara had already figured out that together we were actually kind of a good duo. And the project managed to bring a huge amount of, it eliminated an enormous amount of software bloat in our messaging systems. And because of that, we were able to institute all sorts of policies that my team got to write about and program and everything else. And so I thought, okay, ICs and the managers who help them. Only then I got to talk to Marek a bit. And really, his essential merit, and that's what he called it once, was in finding out what people were good at and feeding that and finding where people needed scaffolding, but encouraging them to find independence and creativity in their work. And well, Michelle was invited on because Michelle, who has been so early in her career, has in the last couple of years been on the conference circuit because she gets curious about things and she just does these deep dives into tech and design and everything else. And you guys asked her to come talk. And it's kind of remarkable for such a young person, and it's very, very brave. And Cal was doing a talk for our show and tell, our monthly, everybody developer talks. And he was talking about how he got curious about things and ended up writing tools that were just critical now in the critical path. And lately he's been pulled from that kind of independence into almost co-managing with his managers. And I just find that to be so fascinating. And John is my favorite person ever because John, as president of our C++ Guild, would would call me in to help him with something. And I felt at a certain point like a little kid who had a parent teaching them how to ride a bike. Because I was thinking, okay, he's there and he's really doing it. And he stopped holding on about 3 blocks earlier. And I never found, and I find him to be just so motivating. And he does it without ego. He does it by being excited about the fact that the bicycle is still going. And it's hugely motivating. So I realized all of us are bringing these strange, different personalities to it. And because of that, I think we're accomplishing a lot. And it's really very, very free. So off-road now means, who are we? Making it work. Off-road now means, how do you build a career that just inflates you on a daily basis? And how do you get support for that? And how do you get guidance for that? And sometimes how do you mess it up and recover from that? I could ask them a question, or you guys could start me with a question. Who is struggling or thinking about any of these issues? About how do you get past your title? How do you get past your daily assignment to just love what you're doing every day? Okay, Lara, I'm going to have, you have a toss question. Yay. Even better.
How do you figure out what's important?
I have to take this one.
Please do.
So, that's the ultimate question of software development, right? So, there is no simple answer, but what you can basically all we have is looking at examples of something that succeeded or something that failed, and it gets better with experience, which means in this panel, if a manager has some individual contributor who has some experience that goes beyond what the team is normally doing, that's something that's a resource that like should be used, should be used, should be leveraged. So then that's my answer.
Yeah, John.
I think we're missing a chance to quote Tony here. It depends. So there's a mix of viewpoints. One of them is obviously the stuff coming from the people that are working on the code actively, the people, if you develop libraries or infrastructure, the people that are actually using that, and where their pain points come from. And so talking to those people and interacting with them and understanding how they want to see things made better is very important. There are also the people that are actively working on the code, and they see problems and things that can be fixed and things that can be improved. And there's also the business managers and everyone else that is basically saying, oh, we need this feature so that we can do X and we can do Y. And very often you can have collaborations where you can try to find sequences between the tech debt that engineers think need to be paid down and how paying off particular pieces of that tech debt can work to implement a feature that will make pain go away for the users. And so a lot of work is trying to figure out how to match that up and actually make something that finds a project that will make everyone happy.
And I think it's a thin line between, what you think as a developer is a very cool feature versus what is actually a very useful and impactful feature. And I wouldn't say it's always to do with what the client wants, because, again, I think a lot of it is paying down your tech debt as well. So if it's going to help, your team and your team's happiness, that goes a long way as well.
Is that always clear? You once told me that there was a 6-to-1 ratio. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, I throw a lot of ideas at the wall all the time in rapid fire, and not all of them hit, but some of them do. And a lot of times, I think it's good to, especially with juniors on the team, to help them say, like, okay, this guy is experienced, but we just shot down all his ideas, right? I hope they're not afraid to, have that same experience.
Larry, you described something very similar to that. That you find freedom because that you find freedom out of offering just a bunch of stuff that you think might or might not help.
I was going to say that you've trapped me between multiple thoughts now. I was going to say that, like, I'm just going to go with what is important thing, and then maybe I'll forget what you've asked in a minute or so.
Conversation going on.
So, I love neatness in code and simplicity and beautiful things, and that's just like not very important when you're kind of like a couple of levels away, or it doesn't appear important. But often it kind of is. So Bloomberg kind of basically provide a service to our customers, and it is kind of like there's a whole engine of huge amounts of software that kind of is able to process data and display all manner of kind of assets and things and data and information to our customers, and we kind of like evolve the system to provide the service in a way that's kind of like a robust and grows the whole time. And over the years, the way that you provide services or the best practices change, but we're in a state of continuous evolution. We've got lots of really kind of old code that does great stuff. But sometimes we need to kind of like provide it in a different way. We kind of like, move to different architectures, provide things, in different interfaces. And what enables us to change is often actually simplicity and beauty in code. And so sometimes what looks like paying technical debt down is actually preparing us to be more agile going forward. So a lot of kind of like the things that kind of like irritate me, and it's kind of like, oh, this is not beautiful. We've given all of our application developers freedom with, how they integrate with our framework. And they've used this framework, and now they've kind of like, some of them have kind of like, not fully understand the stuff that we've provided and have used all of these options don't really make sense as a simplicity that they could have used. If only I could kind of communicate, but like, I've just seen one example and then later I see this other example. If only like everybody could just use the simplest form, except where they actually need the power. But being able to, but when you kind of like see this lack of beauty and have the opportunity to, if you get the opportunity to kind of communicate that and say, hey, actually, we see you're doing lots of different things and that's all great, but there's a simpler way forward. If we all use this, then sometimes, you get, okay, everybody's using this unified library to do things, or this unified CMake module to do things. It's like, right now, we have the power because we can change the CMake module to improve the way, just to make a change that doesn't require any of the users to make any change, but we can immediately provide benefits and kind of move forward. So sometimes, like that thing that irritates me because it's not beautiful and simple actually turns out to be like practical and strategic and a good thing for the company. And I think and when you can kind of see that, you start to go, yeah, this is not neat, but it doesn't matter. This is not neat, but if it was, it'd be really powerful. And that's kind of like, I guess it's experience again as to what the difference is.
Now, Cal and Lara, both of you have gotten in the habit of bringing these things up at meetings and saying, I want to look at this, I want to try this, dealing with maybe being shot down a few times, coming back. But maybe that's not an automatic. Michelle, you and I were talking about how it can be hard to figure out how to take what is fascinating you at any given moment and acknowledge that you were putting in hours and weekends and your own time in a way to do things to share it with the team in a way that maybe somebody starts to direct. And what makes that scary for you? Okay.
So the question is it about really bringing back things?
It's tying your need to fly to value for the people who are paying the bills. Yeah.
Right. So it's quite tricky. It should ideally not be so. And like the fact of the matter is, at least for me personally at this point, so I did a talk today. And any guesses for how long I took to actually prepare for that talk, which I hope was good. I don't know. But okay, I see many thumbs up. Any guesses? Months? How many months? Yeah, exactly. You hit it. Spot on. Well done. Well done. But yeah, it took me 6 months to actually prepare for that talk. And it was not just actually work time. Although my managers and TLs were super supportive, I personally kind of felt bad taking up company time to, research something that I wasn't directly working on. And I spoke to Sherry about it and I told her, I have like 20% of my time at Bloomberg, which I can use to do literally anything. But the thing is, I'm also at Bloomberg. I hold several other titles. So I'm something known as a rep at Bloomberg, where it's like a special sort of IC that brings in technologies. I'm also a member of the C++ Guild. I'm also a lead of our women's community. There's a lot. And that's what that 20% actually goes into. So the remainder is my weekend. And it's really hard bringing that, taking up company time, especially if it's not directly related. So how do you bring it back? Well, it has to start with a conversation between you and your TL. It's a conversation I need to have still. And really asking them how you can tie what you're good at, this is what Sherry said, what you're good at and bring it back to the work you do. So for example, I love researching things. And so maybe I could research something we're working on. And this is something I do when we start a new project, which we have oftentimes. It's so easy for me to just dive into something I don't know anything about and deliver. I know I can do it. My TL knows I can do it. My managers know I can do it. But how do you bring this back to conferences?
Well, I think once you're doing a project that you get to know a lot about, you can talk at conferences. What I was trying to tell you is, if the initial research project feeds the team, then the work on conferences or making the talk will feel less other. It will be a report of what you've done for home. But it is scary. I was very shy about talking about anything I was doing that was outside of what the team was doing until I listened to these guys. And they were doing such a great job of enhancing the people who were paying the bills, of enhancing the teams they were on. So I started asking my TL and a brand new manager, this is what I'm good at. This is my superpower. When there's a new project, you want me. I can talk to everybody. You couldn't do a whole team of journalists in a software shop. It would come to a halt. But one of me is useful. And it's stressful to find all the ideas by myself. Sometimes I would love it if you would say, I need your help with something. And it makes me look less like somebody who kind of wants to be special and more like somebody who can help enhance the mission at hand. Although you don't want to lose the idea that you may come up with something that nobody else has thought of, which is what Lara and I did that time. John, you said that when you were still an IC, you were doing a lot of work, and if anything, your early reviews were interesting.
So when I first joined Bloomberg, I was on a different team than I am now, but I was not doing a very good job of self-advocacy. Even though I kind of had a lot of work that I was doing on the side in order to try to improve things, make things better, I wasn't really getting much recognition for it. So I had the first 3 or 4 reviews were pretty mediocre. One time I was working on a particular project that dramatically decreased the amount of disks that we were using. And we ended up in a situation where it was physically impossible for us to get more disk in order to stay in business. We had about 3 weeks before that particular part of Bloomberg was in real trouble. And so I kind of found out that we were in this situation, kind of went to the people at the top of that part of the organization. It's like, hey, I have this project that I've been working on. Is it okay if I just finish it and implement it? And they were, kind of desperate. I'm like, yeah, go ahead. And 3 weeks later, we were using a third of the disk space that we were using originally, and we went another 2 years without buying disks. I think it overall saved several $1 million a year worth of operational expenses. So that was the first year that I actually got a pretty good review. But a lot of it was because I finally actually stood up and said, hey, these are the things that I'm doing. This is the stuff that I'm doing, and why you should think it's important.
I actually have a question. What if the stuff you're doing is hard to measure? So the conferences we do, I know personally that people value and appreciate it, not just at Bloomberg, but even outside.
So one of the things, first off, I'm no longer the co-chair of the C++ group. I turned into last month. But one of the things that people in that position do is kind of the way that we kind of try and organize that 20% time for everyone, is that people that are in that position have a job that once a year, or maybe twice a year, depending on the exact situation, they have to try to explain to everyone's managers and TLs why what someone is doing for the guild is important to the company or to the broader community of people that are involved in that technology. So for someone in the C++ guild, I don't know that I wrote yours last year, but I probably did.
It was memorable.
There were 60 of them, which is a lot to do. You have to go and talk to the people that people are working with and ask, hey, what is it that this person actually did? Help me understand what they're doing. And then put that together into a message that explains not just what the person did, but why it's important. Because as you said, a lot of times it's difficult to explain to someone why what you're doing is important, especially if you yourself haven't thought too much about it in detail.
Larry, you look like his.
Oh,
Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
You talked about measuring things, right? And that's kind of where, what I'm thinking about. like this project, right, for reducing this usage, or conference preparation. Like, well, I mean, there were a lot of mentions of like weekend work in that, which is concerning, I think, but also like, what if there's no crisis? Like, how do you? And I guess my broader question, when you're talking about, you know, being motivated to work on something because it's beautiful, or doing things for, you know, preparing for conference talks because this is your passion, things of that nature. How is your performance measured? I guess at Bloomberg, or even if you can compare this to other places, where, you know, you ain't closing any Jira tickets. You know what I mean?
That's a really good question. I think fundamentally, measuring things is exceedingly hard, and I have an issue with executive function. Unless I'm motivated on something, I find it really hard to just do something that I'm not interested in. And sometimes, actually, that's kind of like a good thing, because sometimes the reason I'm not motivated in something is because I don't think it's the right thing to do. But to go back to the measuring thing, measuring is really, really hard. Really hard. And unless you're lucky like John was with like disk space, or like I was in one of my earlier projects. So one of the things that I worked with Sherry on was like say, hey, you should use this interface to generate your message libraries. And one of the reasons behind this was because we'd updated the way you generate message libraries to make them more space efficient. We have some really big executables. At one point, one of them was like reaching the limit on one of the platforms that we've since ditched. And I made a change, and because we worked to get everybody to adopt the new interfaces, the change that I made under the hood was able to give us, so we have like, all the libraries just tend to naturally grow because like little bug fixes go in, you know, the date improves and new exchange symbols come in, and just, you always have to add a little bit of code all the time. So we've got this like natural progression. The change I made kind of freed up the space before we ran out of space. It gave us about an extra, I think it was 18 months of headroom before, and then we kind of did some other re-architectures. It's no longer a problem. We ditched the platform that was worse. Everything's good. So that was kind of what we came up with, some measurable examples. I don't have a good answer, except to say that like some stuff is just intangible. It really helps to have like understanding management. I think probably one of my most annoying features is that as a relatively senior engineer in my team, one of my more important activities is to review some of my other team members' code, and the way it tends to go is like, hey, you know, Laura, are you going to take this review? Sure, I'm going to take that review. And then I'm doing some other stuff. I clear it off, and I got like, you know, an hour late in the day, and I'll start to review it and think, I don't like this. Not quite sure why. And then the next morning, I think I'll get back to it, and I don't. I do something else because some other email came in, and I kind of look at that. And then 2 days later, I'll come up with this review saying, this is interesting, but I think the fundamental problem is that this change is addressing it like this, and I think we should look at it in this completely different way. And about, you know, a week later, we have a change which is beautiful and entirely different from what anybody expected to before. How the hell do you quantify that? I don't know.
So, like, because it's my job, right? So, like converting like real life into like numbers is always, it's like number of Jira tickets closed, like number of lines produced, but the number of lines of code deleted, right? Like, but it's that's like not necessary really. You can always at least be able to explain the impact, like why this was useful. Like it's like storytelling, you know, like if John has a story, I saved like all this space. Lara has a story, hey, we just, you know, like we reduced this like code size and it enabled us to do this. If Michelle has a story, hey, this research, you know, helped us to execute this project this way. But like there is always possibility to work on something that's interesting or beautiful, but doesn't ever like you do it like 10 times, and 10 times it's like it goes nowhere. Definitely that's not the way to do it, right? Like there needs to be, not each time, like you should be allowed to fail, but from time to time you need to, hit the jackpot. That's what I have.
But there's also advocating through failure, right? This didn't pan out, but we got something from it, or this was experientially worth it. I don't know, John.
I actually wanted to comment on the whole working on the weekend thing. That's not expected, but it's very hard to stop someone from doing it if they want to. So you I hope you do. Yeah. Okay. What was the actual question?
I just want to say, like, I accidentally solve a lot of problems when I don't mean to. So I have to force myself sometimes, but I do not work outside of hours almost ever. Unless somebody kind of calls me because we have a production problem that's outside my normal hours, and I'm on call for that. I try really hard just to not to, and I have now got some activities and hobbies that I do instead. Although that doesn't stop me going, oh yeah, we should refactor, because that is the issue with that thing that I've been reviewing over the past days. Yeah, that's it. Because that's it. It doesn't need to be templated on this thing, and then we can have an action. And I have to stop myself actually logging in and writing things down. I just say, right, park that thought, come back to it during working hours. But yeah, it's like at previous jobs, I don't know. I'm going to use the word burnout. I've never burnt out myself, but I've got close, and I've got friends who have. I don't ever want to go there, and I think it's important. As somebody who's relatively senior in years, I think I do try and lead by example there. So if people have kind of given an indication that they've been working outside of their normal hours, and it's not because they've been called, I try and say, you don't have to do that. In fact, you probably shouldn't do that, please.
See, but that's the thing, right, Lara? So if you see it as work, yeah, definitely don't work on weekends, not encouraging this. But if you're genuinely interested in something, like I would do this even if there was no conference, or, I would do it as a hobby. So, I don't know, this is me personally. Please don't work on weekends.
But you do need to rest, and it does, if you're exhausted, it will take away from other things. Cal, you've had an interesting transition in your career in that you went from the projects that you were selling to being pulled into the core. Explain, it's like they took what you're good at, and they learned that, and that they're using you differently now.
Yeah, so I was going to bring up the points about, looking at the JIRAs and whatnot. I think I went, 2 months this year without having any tickets on my team's JIRA board. And being brought into different projects, I'm part of some working groups, to try and evaluate in particular performance of our build systems. And then my manager switched teams and, to try something different. I have a new manager. And then one of our first one-on-ones is, so what do you do? And it's an interesting question, I have that rapport with my old manager. He knows exactly, what I'm working on, why it's important, and trying to build that up again. So I started to make better sure I'm taking much better notes of what I'm actually working on. And that's helpful too, because sometimes you'll work, 6 hours on a problem, and you'll give your final thoughts. But really, the more important things were, those problems that you had in the middle of discovering it, or that really help you drive home, why was this confusing, and why is the conclusion at the end make sense? But yeah, so it's still something that I struggle with a bit, is promoting myself and making sure that a lot of the things I do don't just get lost. Sometimes I see a problem, I just throw up a PR, and I just, that's it. Okay, we're done. We get that reviewed, it's merged in, the problem is solved. But I don't necessarily make sure that I'm accredited with that all the time. So
Recently, because our new skip level manager was really interested in seeing me get more involved with the things that they had already identified as priorities rather than coming up with new ones. My TL tasked me with looking at the list of tasks that have already been laid out and taking one. None of them were what I was good at, but if we were scanning for secrets. We were making sure that Bloomberg was more bulletproof. And for each scan, I realized there was a whole load, there were new people who were having questions and having problems and everything else, and it required outreach. And I said, you don't want me on that. You don't want me programming that or trying to figure out how to do that. You want me handling the outreach for that and maybe also sharing with other people how to better handle the outreach and how to figure out what we can put in places where people don't have to ask questions, they can find the answers. So sometimes it's like, yes, I'm going to get involved with you. Can I get involved in a way that I know I'm going to be really, really good at, rather than sort of slowing everybody down because I want to say I'm part of this project? But it's hard, and it's sometimes scary. And I find myself hiding when I'm working weekends too, especially if it's on conference stuff. But I need to be, the more I show what I'm doing, even when it's external, the more maybe I give other people on my team a chance to say, I'd like to do some of that too. And maybe you can show me. Michelle, you mentioned that somebody asked you to mentor them like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, Sherry. Like, that's one way you can give back. There are so many people that want their voices to be heard. And you being in a position to help them do this, it speaks volumes. It adds impact. And it is something you can take back to any evals you have. And even, those feedback forms they have at conferences. And I don't know, does CppNorth have this? I have no idea. Oh, yes. Okay, cool. This is so useful for those metrics. And even, even when you're explaining to someone what they can do better, using your own metrics and sharing it with them. This is something I've done for someone, actually.
Actually, John has said this. John, you encouraged me to make sure that I wrote letters for people who did things that were valuable for me. And it's hard, but sometimes you also want to ask the people who say thank you for this to write a letter too. Just to it's hard to promote yourself. It's hard to show who you are and what you're doing when you're different.
Some of the times it's much easier to promote other people, which is actually kind of the point of that exercise. So kind of like I said, like a lot of the people that are kind of in this chair position for the 20% time, spend a lot of effort trying to explain to other people why all of the things that everyone is participating is important. But also, if you work in a particular project and someone else helps you, sometimes you can help both them and yourself by not just writing to them to say thank you, but writing to their manager to say thank you. If you help organize something and the people that are on it feel well supported, they will make sure that your managers also know that you did a good job. So it's very important to say thank you to people, but also in that thank you note explain why what that person did was important. And kind of the more you do that, the more people are happy to help you, because they don't view it as something, oh, I'm giving some of my time. So, oh, this is an opportunity for me to get something that's rewarding.
Does anybody have a question? Yes.
So it might go in a different direction, but how, as individual contributors, how do you all grow? How do you expand your scope? Because on the managerial side, I can see, I guess you climb up a tree or something. But on the IC side, like, what are some examples of opportunities you have taken to grow and expand your scope?
Yeah, so I thought kind of like Bloomberg's kind of really good because there are a lot of programs you can kind of contribute to. So there's like the rep program, and we have guilds where you can kind of like both learn things and show your expertise within the organization, but like outside of your team, kind of like across the engineering organization. for me personally, I only just kind of like am now tangentially involved in one of our guilds. I'm not kind of in the rep program, so I'm kind of like like off the road and in the weeds, if you like, in terms of that. It's what you're looking for, I think, and I'm not sure because like I don't know who I'm. Okay, so there are some individuals at Bloomberg who I look up to who are also, actually I quite like, I'm just going to use independent contributors now.
I know, but it's kind of helpful.
And the thing is like, they have influence because they are respected, and they're respected because some of the things that some of the initiatives that they've done and driven. So there is definitely an aspect to what team you're involved in. I think one of the reasons that I don't feel the need to be kind of part of some of these programs in order to have influence is because the team I happen to be in is an infrastructure team that is essentially providing services to application teams that can then use. So I'm almost in a more natural position where I can see what other teams are doing and interact with them and make changes and recommendations that affect lots of people. But yeah, it's kind of like, I think what satisfies me is when I have an outsized impact to what you would expect an individual contributor to have in a team of my size. So when I change the interface that hundreds and hundreds of libraries use, and that has like a meaningful impact for our executable size, that is kind of like, that's really cool. When I change the interface so it's substantially easier to use, so that when a team says like, I want people to be able to use our service, and it's kind of like, oh, you can stamp out a message library. You literally just stamp it out. You take your schema, you stamp it out. You don't have to do anything special. You don't have to learn about CMake or our interfaces. It's just a template. And if we make that easier, then that's a kind of like a great impact. So you're looking for ways to have like a wider influence, become kind of like, I'm not very good at self-promoting either, but just naturally become better known. And you can do that in a number of ways. And we're fortunate at Bloomberg, we've got some great official ways, but the unofficial ways are also kind of cool too.
Does everybody want that? I know that both John and Merrick have expressed to me how John, because he came from physics where independence is valued, and Merrick, because his first hire was Lara, that some people on the team are not necessarily looking to stand out or be different, and is that a challenge?
So like you asked like ICs, but maybe you are interested in the answer from the manager as well. So how we think the ICs can grow, and like there are different ways, but like what comes to my mind first is really ownership of things, like parts of the product and the problems, being consistently kind of ahead of the curve of the discussion and like seeing to the future. And then your manager can rely on your expertise, on this like your like, what is it, like the fresh cache of your brain to drive the decision process or whatever. So really like ownership and being kind of consistently owning something for like some long time. And there's also a way, if it's something like it's an important problem, big problem, something painful, that's the way to be recognized, outside of your team, across the company, because it's like the story with the disk storage. Yeah, so John is this guy who solved this, and so and if you have a number of things like this consistently, then like it's amazing, and you don't need to be manager, and you will be recognized. And sometimes like we have the process of in the end, it's kind of how we measure things, but in the end, like it goes into like compensation, for example, right? And if I like work on these, and I want to really to promote this person, and then this is checked with my manager and the skip manager, and they said, who is this guy, So, and then I have hard time to justifying, this increase or that increase. But if they know who is this guy, who is this person, then they said, okay, we remember that crisis and or that project or something. So
Sometimes small things add up too. I used to be managed by Cal's manager, Daniel, and I went to him once and said, oh my God, I've been here, for at this point, 15 years. And, because I came from journalism instead of engineering, Bloomberg believes strongly in engineers managing engineers. How do people know that I'm senior? I'll never have that title. And Daniel looked back and said, have you not paid any attention to who you are? His biggest problem wasn't that I wasn't seen as senior, because I had helped so many people with so many small things that people just got used to coming to me. His big problem was I didn't see it. So I would see a problem and I'd go, oh, hop into my Zoom. I can help you. And they would be like dropping everything going, oh my God, Sherry's making me come into her Zoom. I had to learn that people perceived me in such a way that I really needed to say, I think I can help you. Do you have time to come into my Zoom, or would you like to talk later? I didn't actually understand my own impact and my own weight. And his manager taught me that I had to really necessarily sort of tone it down and be kinder. Because even though I meant to help, I was terrifying people. So sometimes it's the big initiative. But don't estimate the person who's just super helpful to a load of people when everybody knows your name.
Yeah. I think I had a similar experience where someone came up to me from a separate team and asked why I felt this way about something, which I had no idea what they were talking about. Apparently it was he said, she said, they said that Cal said this was a bad idea. And I think I probably had said, some comments like that, but I guess if you are perceived as senior, your words could be taken a bit more heavily, and you'll notice that as well. So one of the things I'd like to touch. Okay. So not everyone is immediately senior at all things. So one of the things that's important to do, again, I'm kind of new at being the manager thing, is to try to kind of meet people where they are in different subjects. So sometimes people want to get better at something that they don't currently view themselves as good at. You figure out how to support them in that and keep them going. And I'd say learning new technology until they actually get to the point where they're helpful at it. Other times it's kind of finding what someone's comfort level is in terms of exposure to a new product or being more publicly visible. So a lot of what I do is to try to identify, like, hey, what opportunities would you like? What is it that what would you regard a successful outcome to this project to be? And then trying to support, get their people the opportunities that they want, and make sure and try to ensure that the outcomes are what they view as successes.
Andrew Haddad did that for me. He's a manager who decided to go be a counselor for kids, which is probably why he was a great manager for me. And that's how Show and Tell happened. We're curating a monthly talk among our a conglomeration of 12 individual teams. And I wanted to coach. I wanted to help people get good at this. And we now curate a monthly talk where people need to keep their promises to talk, and they need to talk to me twice at least. Once in the very beginning so I can help format it, once in the end for a dry run, and as many times in between as they want. And he was looking for ways that I would be happy. And it became something that was respected, although God knows if it was going to. Anyway, you had a question.
I do. I have a question. Again, coming back to this idea of growing in seniority as an individual contributor. I spent a long time running a consulting company where we did software development, and people would come and say, I need an application that does this, this, and this, or I need a website that does this, this, and this. And sometimes their explanation of what they wanted and how it would work was great and actionable. And sometimes we had this saying, some clients really need consultants. How do you handle it when a manager comes to you and says, need you to just solve the speed of light or whatever this problem, like the question is not the right question, but it's been brought to you?
I think a lot of time it's getting over fear of telling someone that something might not work. I think it's healthy to have an argument with your manager. I do frequently, and you can discuss back and forth. Why, and if it's a particularly challenging problem, it definitely shouldn't just be the two of you. Discussing back and forth. Bring in the full team. Get everyone's expertise. Right.
Michelle, you look like you're nodding.
Yeah, there's also one other thing. I agree 100% with what Cal said, but also asking the why behind it sometimes adds more context and then helps you solve the problem easily or even change the problem. But yeah, I think Cal nailed it.
The what are you trying to accomplish question.
Yes.
Yeah, I think if you're not disagreeing with people on your team, everyone needs to think critically about it. There's no way most of the time the first thought is the correct idea.
The way that you stated that made me think of something. There's a statement from physicists is that this isn't right. This isn't even wrong. I think that was Fermi. Cal also made me think of something, and that is that one of the things that you expect, particularly from senior software engineers, is that you want people who passionately represent the technical solution that they think is best. And by passionately, it does include arguing with people, but of course that should be professional arguing. And once a consensus is reached, then everyone that's involved in that argument should understand why they reached that consensus and be able to advocate for what actually that solution is.
Lara, do you want to take a stab at this one too?
I don't know. I had a lot of thoughts actually. I don't know if you're familiar with. I think it's Rands in Repose blog. There's a really old article about kind of I think what he refers to as senior free electrons. So if you ask some senior individual contributor who's a bit of a unmanageable person, I think is kind of where he goes to, to do something that they don't believe in, they'll just not really do it. And I think that's not a healthy way to do the conversation. But if you are a senior individual contributor and you get asked we need to solve, we need to get this done, we need to solve this problem and get this system working like this, it's kind of do we? Because to do that it's going to involve all of this mess and all of this thing, Can we take a step back, look at an even bigger picture and say, what are we actually trying to achieve? Because doing it in this system is obviously painful. So maybe we should do something completely different and kind of getting to, taking enough step backs that the difficult thing either becomes it becomes more obvious perhaps that the difficult thing is an instance of an incorrect approach, or if you take enough of a step back, actually, we're doing the same, or what you're proposing is the same thing as these people over here are doing, but for in a way that makes sense, and the only reason that this doesn't fit in is because of this awkward spot. So maybe what we should do is actually a smaller project to do this special casing, and then it becomes an instance of this again, and that's an already solved problem. Pouring the water out of the kettle in order to follow the instructions to boil water from an empty, starting from an empty kettle point of view. Something like that.
Eric, does it help that you and CB have been working together, or you and Lara, I'm sorry, have worked together for so long that you can trust, or do you still argue?
We argue and we love it. So this, what she described is actually sounds very familiar. Something doesn't fit. Why doesn't fit? That's why. So I don't think the length of the relationship is like that important. I think it kind of clicked very quickly. You know, if you understand the other person, that's you know, it doesn't need it. You need to work with them. I don't know, for like 5 years to get to each other's like understanding. Yeah, so I think it's like we found a way how to work together, and I think, like I speak for myself, like I enjoy it when I'm like pitching an idea and like okay, what, you know, so it's great because I trust her judgment. Basically, that's what she earned. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I made a beautiful contribution in the direction of solving like an underlying issue, and like 2 weeks ago saying we shouldn't even be going in this direction because we should be solving a map. But like I've kind of been mildly persuaded, and so now like got some really good changes in that area. So yeah, it's a two-way thing.
It's going so fast. It's so great. On the topic that you were talking about I'm so jealous about your 20% time of free time. But how do you make sure that you can, once your project or thing that you're doing is you have show and tells and you show people, okay, I got this thing going on. It's good for me. I think it's going to be good for the company. But how do you push the step to make it a real product or a real tool or real library that people will actually use? Do you have to like stop somewhere and then push it to other teams, or?
So I will say that, you know, and different teams and different orgs will do it differently. Like our org is traditionally done like a 10% time, so it's like every other Friday, you know, do what you're interested in. But it's never been you must do something meaningful with, you know, this. It's what's going to help you learn and grow. And so some people have just been, you know, taking classes, right, that is relevant to their course, or reading research papers about, you know, scheduling jobs or things like this, and just, you know, coming back to the team. For our group, we do we call it the parking lot that we have after stand-up, and it's, you know, it can be related to, you know, things that are ongoing, things that you find interesting. You know, sometimes it's like, hey, look at this cool thing I did over the weekend, right? Bringing your idea then out of 10% to 20% time is usually finding the correct people that are going to be interested in working on what you do, right? So find other people who are also motivated by, you know, the same thing that interests you. And I think that's where the guilds help a lot as well.
Also adding to what Cal said, we have these things called hackathons, at least in our org. Just curious, how many people have this in their teams or companies as well? Okay, just a handful. That's interesting. But what I notice is at these hackathons, like I love learning about things, not just C++, don't hate me, but I also tried out some cool AI things during this hackathon. And I was able to bring this back and work with people who also found it interesting and wanted to learn during that time. So that as well is a nice, you know, opportunity to learn and grow. But yeah. Why don't more companies have this?
Not all Uber does.
Yeah.
That is a crazy gift. It is. We get that.
So from the managerial perspective, I guess, the 20% time stuff is specifically supposed to be things that benefit Bloomberg as a whole, not necessarily a specific team. But if you encourage your individual contributors to work on particular projects that may be relatively well aligned with your team, or just to get involved in order to develop better connections, that can actually be real benefits to your team in relatively short order. It may be that there's now a Rust client and service framework for an inter-process communication system. It might be that someone now has connections to the people into metrics, or you gain a much better understanding of how a particular type of metric is applied, not just in your organization, but specifically, I'm on an infrastructure team, but specifically for the application developers, for the things that are customer facing, how they make those measurements, and therefore like how you can help them. So the 20% time stuff is not necessarily do whatever you want. It's supposed to be like do things that are somewhat directed, but it is extremely loose in terms of what the actual thing is or which problem you're trying to solve. It's just supposed to be you're smart, figure out something that will help, and kind of the role of managers and the other people on the teams and the people they're collaborating with is to try to steer people and help vet the ideas of like, okay, yes, this does sound like a good idea. Are you already working on it? Would you like my help?
But you also have to be good at picking up your share of the trash, your share of the on-call stuff, your share of the random questions. And you have to recognize that your time away impacts other people, and you need to make sure that they are invited to take their time away too. And it is a balance, it is a negotiation. You can't be the guy who comes in 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and breaks things and disappears. You need to be somebody who cares enough about the people around you to recognize that the freedom you've been given is a gift, and that with great power comes great responsibility. You need to give back just a little bit. And people need to trust that you feel that way, that you actually respect who they are too, even if they're less good at asking for that freedom. Tom, you mentioned how important it would be maybe for managers to invite somebody who's shy to step up a little bit, because some people might need that kind of invitation. So there's a balance. We're almost done. Would anybody like? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, good, cool. I didn't know we had an hour and a half. That's fantastic. So,
We do?
I just found that out. So who would like to ask the next question? Or share an experience? Yeah.
So just revisiting, because now we have time. Is on the topic of pursuing what you're good at, how do you balance, leaning into your skill set and making best use of what you know and what you're good at, versus growing and putting yourself in those uncomfortable, areas where you know you're not the best person, but you want to become better, or to help other people, and maybe the best person isn't available. So how do you balance that? Trying to spend your time sort of split between growth and productivity.
Well, how do you do it?
I don't have a good answer for that. I'm still trying to figure it out. I try to bounce around between whatever's most urgent in the moment. It is not a good strategy. Don't do this. But that's the best I got. Is I sort of grow through coincidence based on what's going on.
I suggest, and tell me if you guys agree with this, that the topic may be new. You may be new to the area, but your fundamental personality, the ability to dig, the ability to try to find the ways to make things beautiful, the ability to throw things against the wall to see what other people think about them and negotiate that in a team meeting. I think those things grow because you become braver, or people encourage you to be brave, but those are consistent on a continuum. And maybe the topic matters less. Like these weird pockets of expertise you might get, than the fact that you are somebody who is anxious to fall into an interesting project that, I don't know.
It sounds like you've become like, expert firefighter then, if it's bouncing between things that are like more urgent. I think you've got to I think you've got to kind of like I think you do have to allow yourself to be drawn into things. So I was talking earlier this week, and I was saying, I don't know, I haven't really had a good idea for a talk in a while, and I used to talk kind of like most years, and maybe that's not a bad thing, and maybe it's good. But I remember now that the last kind of like last couple of talks I've given, which is kind of like a while ago, but one of them was like things I learned while trying to avoid becoming a CMake expert. And you know, it's a bit of a humorous title, but the thing was, is kind of like it's also why I happen to be quite an expert in Git, and that's because I wanted to do lots of C++ work, and about, you know, a decade and a half ago, the thing that was irritating me about my job was our source control system and the whole build infrastructure, and how I had to spend so much time fiddling with stuff that wasn't C++. And then I ended up becoming an expert in cleaning up our entire you know, how we organized our repository. This is a completely different organization, by the way. Although when I only started at Bloomberg because they promised me they'd just started using Git, and then I became the administrator for our old Git system, and then I became one of the team members when we rolled out the enterprise version of GitHub. Yeah, okay, I've said that anyway. I think that's common knowledge now. And then, you know, somebody said, oh, now we're taking over these CMake modules, you know, decades later. And that is how, and I found myself looking at other people who are using the CMake module that I'd inherited to maintain. And before long, I was finding myself looking at other people's CMake and accidentally having an opinion. Gosh, this isn't good CMake. And I thought, oh, wait. I seem to have become, like, I seem to have now invested opinions on how CMake should look. And so I think you've got to allow yourself to be led. And like, I'm by no means a CMake expert, but I now have a much better idea of the space that CMake sits in, and you know, what, if I've got a library and I've got a CMake list.txt, what naturally belongs in there, what doesn't belong. You know, if I put this in my CMake list, is it easy to integrate it into a bigger CMake project, or have I put too much like opinion that should be on the build environment that should be passed in from the outside? It's all interesting things, and all really relevant for other people in our organization to learn from someone. Because what I've discovered, and why I kind of like accidentally got into Git in the first place, and why I accidentally got into CMake, is that a lot of developers who want to write code in their favorite language, and the ones that I've kind of interacted with have basically been a lot of C++ developers. As soon as they step outside of C++, for some reason, they seem to leave software engineering behind. So like, you know, cut and paste code in that, just because it's CMake list.txt suddenly seems to become more acceptable, or the shell script that kind of puts a whole lot of stuff together. It's not well factored, and like, it could be, it's just software. And a lot of, you know, C++ developers seem to just like let their software engineering principles out the window as soon as it's not C++. And I try to not let that happen. I try to let myself be kind of led into things like that.
So what you're describing is a lot of freedom, a lot of trust, right? You got this 20% time, you got this, I don't know, permission to go explore your own skill set, bring back, you know, the useful stuff back into the team, so on. And that's a lot of freedom, a lot of trust. How do you like screen or hire for people who thrive in this high freedom, high trust environment?
Oh yeah, also 20 minutes.
So I think the impression is maybe not entirely accurate. Like, there definitely is people that just, you know, work on the official project plan and the official Jira board, and that's the kind of the baseline. Like, you shouldn't bridge the trust. So how do we hire for it? No, like, we just hire smart and nice people. Like, that's what we do. And And I think the culture, I think it was your talk basically. Like, if you see everybody else, this like peer pressure, everybody else doing this, then you want to fit in. And I think culture, like we have people that we think have the potential and the skills and like, that's another art. But then they come in and they see what everybody else is doing and try to fit in, and it usually works.
Somebody once told me that they could never come work at Bloomberg because there were no layers and levels. And because of that, they couldn't just look up somebody and know how important they were. And I answered that I would confuse them because as an individual contributor, I don't have anybody directly reporting to me. Although I can get anyone on the phone in 5 minutes, that's not obvious. And their answer was, oh, no. They're just blowing smoke so they don't have to pay you too much. They want to keep you happy. There are people who hear that Bloomberg is a place where you will be encouraged, if you want to change jobs, to change teams. We're not a place where you can leave and come back well. Mike tied that to loyalty in books even very early on. And you have to be attracted to that. You have to be attracted to saying that you are making a long-term commitment to a place that's going to encourage you to explore. And unless you decide to climb a very specific ladder, TL to manager, you're not gonna have titles. And this title means this much money. There are trade-offs, there's ambiguity, there is making sure when I had too much freedom, making sure that I wasn't, floating so high that I became detached. So I think people self-select to a certain degree. I had one very senior engineer tell me that they were not ready to come to Bloomberg because they were not ready for their last job.
First off, not everyone takes advantage of the potential of the 20% time. I have several people who I've tried to encourage to participate, and they have declined. Personally, I really enjoy taking advantage of that, but I tend to put too much effort into it, and I have been called out several times. And so I now put a great deal of effort to make sure that I put most of my time into my primary role. Even though a lot of what we're talking about does kind of indicate that there's a huge amount of kind of academic freedom that's available, it does have limits. But the thing that is really expected of people is to develop their network, develop their connections, develop the people that they are connected to, and those relationships. That's the way that people effectively advance inside of Bloomberg, even though you never get a title. And a lot of team leads remain team leads effectively forever. Not everyone ends up being a manager. And I don't think everyone wants to be a manager. There are also a number of people that switch back and forth between being team leads and individual contributors every couple of years. It's not too hard to find people who, like, you look at their job history and literally every 3 years they switch. There's a lot of flexibility, but there's also an expectation that you're going to stay there and kind of develop. I also feel like this is becoming an ad for Bloomberg.
I mean, it kind of is. So I like going back up to the very start of my career. I joined a web development agency, and we were kind of like compiling C++ to deliver HTML. It's really old-fashioned. It was a very small company. I started my title was actually junior programmer. I don't think they use the word junior for starting positions anymore. Because the company was growing kind of really fast, me and a few other colleague junior programmers were doing really well, and we were much better than we expected. It was kind of like we somehow got promised that we would be senior programmers almost inside a year, and then they got confused because it's kind of like, this isn't gonna work. So they made a new level of associate programmer in the middle. And before I got to senior, I kind of left and joined somewhere else. I actually think I joined. I don't know. I think I joined as a senior software engineer and became an associate software architect. And I think this second job pretty much cured me of the. It's kind of like what titles mean depend on the organization, and you can ascribe too much importance to them, and you need to kind of decide. You need to kind of like understand where they fit in the particular organization you're in. And a lot of kind of like, there are lots of quite big software organizations that you probably heard of have got quite famous kind of ladders and scales and things, and it's tied to compensation. And you've got to decide what you want at each stage of your career, what you're looking for. And some people kind of just, join one of these really big companies, and say, I've joined at an X level and I'm going to look to grow to Y level by a certain amount. That doesn't appeal to me so much. I kind of like, I want the compensation that says I'm being recognized for my contribution, and I want to afford enough for, whatever lifestyle hobbies I want. And actually my hobbies are pretty cheap because I enjoy computer games, and people complain that computer games are costing whatever the currency is here, but $80 now for an AAA. It's like, really, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not buying cars for multiple cars for myself, which is a completely different order of magnitude. So, there's there's titles, there's compensation. For other people, it's kind of like, I'm now a centurion, I'm a manager of 10 team leads who have got 10 people under them. So, I'm 100 people up in my organization. People look for different things. And I think it's kind of important to make sure that what you are pursuing in your career is what you want, and is not just what some person you've looked at, I don't know, maybe somebody who went to university has joined a different company and you're kind of measuring yourself against them. Is that what you want to are you looking for the same thing? What do you want out of... You're about to interrupt me, aren't you?
I think it's important for people who might be watching this, or even people in the audience. If you're at a place where there's less overt freedom, or maybe you're at a certain level and you've got a certain title, how do you negotiate or work out passion for your work beyond the title? This is where we started, outside of the hierarchy. Are we saying find a place that doesn't do that? Or are we saying that no matter where you are, you can do some of this by some way?
I think where I was going is kind of like, you've got to decide how you want to measure your progression, and I think in combination with what you said, not all places suit all people, and maybe the place that you've ended up at is not going to provide you the path, the recognition, and the reward that you're particularly looking for, and then you have to look somewhere else. And you've got to decide what you're looking for when you're looking to make that move.
Sorry, my question's quite quick. Related back to the question before, where you had time spent for growth and then time spent for productivity. So as a university student, that's easy for me. Everything's spent for growth because everything's still new to me. But how do you balance, while learning, the struggle and letting yourself go through it, and then asking questions or asking for assistance from somebody who already knows the answer, right? Because you want to not spend too much time on it, but at the same time, if you just skip, you're not going to learn anything.
Thank you. So I think there are kind of two questions here. So for a lot of people that are more senior, one of the things that really frustrates them is when they see someone spend a long time struggling to figure something out without asking a question. And I know that there's a lot of pride associated with figuring something out yourself. And one of my favorite jokes from the Red Green Show, actually, if anyone remembers that, was that reading the instructions isn't asking for help; it's cheating, and therefore it's still cool. But you do have to. So like you have to put enough effort into it in order to try to understand it. And the person who is perhaps the expert or perhaps can give you a shortcut needs to be able to also put enough time into that explanation. So it's not just that you now know what the answer is. It's that you now understand why that's the answer. One of the best things that I've ever been taught very early in my physics career, was that there's functionally no difference between being unable and unwilling to explain something. And that's something that means that as an expert, you need to be willing to take time to break down a question that someone may not understand, or an answer that someone may not fully understand, into sub-answers until you get to the point where they understand all of the sub-answers, and then you can build back up to that ultimate solution, and the novice has the understanding. But also as a novice, you need to be willing to say, hey, I didn't actually understand what you just said. Could you break it down a little bit for me? And then have that conversation. The kind of other part of this, though, is that you do need to be, when trying to balance productivity and growth, is that you need to say what you want. So it's, hey, I understand that I'm really productive doing X, and I'd like to continue doing that as my main thing, but I also really want to learn Y. Is it okay if I take time to do Y? And the answer is almost certainly going to be yes. Although you will occasionally have, oh dear God, we really need you to be doing the thing you're really good at because some major crisis coming. And then you kind of don't do Y for a while and focus on X. But there should still be opportunities for you to grow, and wherever it is that you end up working, even if it's not Bloomberg, should allow you those opportunities. And it's really the way that people go and advance and kind of expand their career. And yeah.
I just, this separation like productivity and growth. I'm like my favorite phrase is learning by doing. I'm a big fan of this because given, the condition is like the doing is something useful, something like that matters. And if you do that, then you are fine, like, because it gives you like the real feedback. It's like, I run this experiment, like Friday afternoon, If you do something real and you see the success, you see that you, for example, sometimes you put your whole yourself into it and it still fails, so that's the hard data that you get, and I think is awesome.
Sure, I think you asked a question about more like traditionally hierarchical organizations and how you end up like able to do your own thing there. And I think from my experience, the answer has a lot to do with political capital. Like how long you've been there, how much you're trusted, how close you are to the right people, the title, all that stuff. And the more political capital you have, the more you're able to just do your own thing and say, like, tell your manager, this is what I'm about to do, rather than having them tell you.
I would say it's negotiation. You're the guy in charge, but this is, or the woman in charge, but this, or the person in charge, and this is what I'd like to do. Are you on board? But also, one of the things Mike has said to those 13-year-olds I talked about during Take Your Children to Work Day is a lot of what happens to you that's good is that somebody says something nice about you behind your back. You may never even know. You don't always know what your own political capital is. It takes some bravery. The same way you need to be brave to say, I don't know. It takes some bravery to say, I would like to step up or step out or be different. And I would like for people to be braver than I was when I first got to Bloomberg. I would like for people to recognize that if you do it respectfully and you say that you're passionate about something and you don't assume that you must get a yes, that people will maybe give you the room to do that, especially if they recognize that you understand that their point of view is important. I started this by saying this is kind of creative. It's kind of an art. And it's not just an art on the part of the individual contributors, but it's also an art for managers. Merrick, do you want to take us home on this one and talk about how you have been trying to cultivate that, finding for people, how to help them grow without making them feel cornered into it, or giving them space, or anybody else who would like to close, but
In 2 minutes.
2 minutes. So it's all about like finding the balance in everything. That's the kind of the beauty that I'm usually seeking. So I'm trying to all the time see people that use the strength of people around me, and like then like a little bit like dance with the system. And also sometimes I see their natural moves, and sometimes like pushing a little bit there and there, and like eventually it all compounds and like makes a big difference.
it's like a dance, right?
It's like a dance, yeah.
You don't push something.
Pushing, like fighting against something, that's I'm usually trying to avoid. Like sometimes some conflict is like necessary, but usually a much better approach on average is that I just put a little bit of pressure in some given time, a little bit, and it's like the dance.
We seem to have 2 more minutes. Does anybody else want to add to that? The art of making this work?
Gen Z quote, you only live once, you do you got this.
Last words?
Thank you very much, everyone.
Guys, thanks for sticking with us. It's been a pleasure.